Quantum leaders, the Pragmatist. Applying the first principle of quantum consciousness, oscillation between strong and weak forces. The Pragmatist's natural style is grounded, methodical, and solution-driven. They are the ones who anchor vision into function, turning plans into action. This makes them vital to any system's stability. Yet through the principle of oscillation between strong and weak forces, the Pragmatist transcends mechanical execution and becomes a quantum stabilizer, someone who oscillates between strength, decisive action, logic, problem-solving, and softness, pause, receptivity, intuitive recalibration. Their power comes not just from what they do, but from when and how they alternate doing with deliberate restraint. With a motivation direction of away from, the Pragmatist is highly attuned to preventing failure, mistakes, and inefficiencies. The strong force shows up in their drive to fix, prevent, and protect. However, if they stay in this alert mode too long, they can become hyper-controlling or resistant to change. The weak force balances them, allowing space for uncertainty, for errors to surface before correcting, for trust in processes not yet proven. Their effectiveness increases when they oscillate between active correction and calm observation. Their attention focus on self allows them to operate independently with high internal standards. The strong force expresses as autonomy, internal regulation, and task efficiency. But the weak force brings the necessary flow, moments of stepping back, accepting help, or tuning into how their work fits into the collective whole. Oscillation between solo precision and open collaboration transforms the Pragmatist into a systems integrator rather than a siloed executor. With an internal frame of reference, they trust their own logic. The strong force is their clarity about what works and what doesn't. Yet if overused, this creates rigidity. The weak force allows them to soften, opening to new methods, subtle shifts, or insights that don't immediately align with their frameworks. Pragmatists who pause to feel their environment, not just measure it, develop the kind of judgment that transcends rules and speaks to wisdom. Their procedural operational style is where the strong force is most evident. They follow steps, they create flowcharts, they move from A to B with reliability. But the weak force becomes essential when processes need flexibility. When external realities shift or new variables enter, the Pragmatist must learn to improvise. The oscillation between trusted steps and adaptive thinking makes their systems resilient, not just efficient. Their specific viewpoint allows them to track detail and monitor outcomes precisely. The strong force here ensures that nothing is overlooked. Yet the weak force invites them to occasionally zoom out, to notice larger patterns, long-term implications, and emerging themes. Oscillating between precision and perspective ensures they don't miss the forest for the trees. With a solo work preference, the Pragmatist thrives in controlled environments. The strong force shows up as focused productivity and deep concentration, but true leadership arises when they oscillate into connection, brief but intentional collaboration, open dialogue, or shared problem solving. Their grounded clarity stabilizes teams when they step out of isolation just long enough to recalibrate the field. Their emotional engagement is dissociated, which often allows them to handle stress and pressure without emotional entanglement. The strong force here keeps them efficient and composed, yet if over-relied upon, it may lead to emotional detachment or numbness. The weak force, the willingness to feel, brings depth to their judgment and warmth to their leadership. Oscillation here allows them to feel enough to connect without losing objectivity. As a matcher, they favor proven methods. The strong force uses precedent as a stabilizing factor. But the weak force challenges them to explore alternatives when old methods lose relevance. The Pragmatist, who oscillates between what works and what might work better, evolves from executor to innovator, rooted in reality, but open to growth. Their through-time orientation grants them excellent planning and timeline awareness. The strong force lets them keep commitments and ensure deliverables. But oscillating into the weak force allows them to sense timing, not just track it, when to delay, when to act faster, when a system is ready for a shift, even if the schedule says otherwise. This intuitive timing elevates their practical genius to strategic foresight. And with a primary drive of things, they are naturally focused on output and results. Yet the oscillation between doing and not doing, between executing and pausing, allows their work to carry not just efficiency, but insight. The pragmatist becomes more than the one who gets things done. They become the steady hand who knows when not to act, when to listen, and when to let something unfold. In this rhythm, they move from operational expert to quantum anchor. Quantum leaders, the pragmatist, dynamic equilibrium as nature's core design. The pragmatist's natural style of methodical execution and functional efficiency finds true mastery in the principle of dynamic equilibrium. This principle affirms that stability isn't found in rigidity. It's found in the tension between constancy and flexibility. For the pragmatist, equilibrium means knowing when to assert control and when to allow space. Their genius is not just in getting things done, but in sensing when a system needs structure and when it needs slack. With a motivation direction of away from, the pragmatist is alert to potential failure, inefficiency, and risk. This drive to prevent errors is essential, but dynamic equilibrium asks them to temper that vigilance with trust. Systems need space to self-correct. People need room to learn. When the pragmatist balances their prevention mindset with moments of openness, patience, and responsiveness, their risk awareness becomes wisdom rather than resistance. Their attention focus on self makes them self-reliant and consistent, but equilibrium calls for relational attunement. Too much autonomy can lead to disconnection. When they allow others to step in, offering support, feedback, or shared execution, they create systems that are more collaborative and ultimately more resilient. They don't lose their focus, they expand its influence. With an internal frame of reference, the pragmatist relies on internal standards of what works. But dynamic systems shift. Equilibrium means holding inner clarity while updating protocols based on evolving needs. This is the difference between a lockdown process and a living process. Pragmatists become system stewards when they can honor their principles and retune them over time. Their procedural operational style naturally lends itself to order, sequence, and logic, but equilibrium demands they design procedures with breathing room. Too much structure becomes brittle. Too little becomes chaos. The mature pragmatist builds frameworks that hold shape and flex, processes that don't just direct action, but support adaptability. Their precision becomes a vessel, not a cage. The specific viewpoint helps them track minute details, but equilibrium arises when they zoom out enough to understand how those details affect the whole. Not every error is worth correcting. Not every deviation is a threat. When they balance their micro-focus with macro-perception, they shift from reactive maintenance to proactive systems flow. With a solo work preference, the pragmatist often achieves more in independent conditions. Yet dynamic equilibrium reminds them that no system functions in true isolation. Their most impactful work emerges when they integrate short moments of relational input, even if they return quickly to solo execution. This rhythm, contact and retreat, builds stronger foundations than isolation ever could. Their dissociated emotional engagement gives them objectivity. But emotion isn't the enemy of effectiveness. Equilibrium is achieved when they allow just enough feeling to inform timing, language, and human nuance. A subtle dose of empathy sharpens execution. Too much emotion may flood their clarity. Too little can create distance. The pragmatist becomes emotionally intelligent not by feeling everything, but by knowing when to feel. As a matcher, they replicate reliable methods. The equilibrium principle asks them to keep one foot in proven ground and one in quiet evolution. What worked 5 years ago might still apply, but it may need a new interface, new language, or softer delivery. The pragmatist becomes a silent innovator, updating legacy methods so subtly that the system evolves without losing cohesion. Their through-time orientation supports deadlines, logistics, and planning. Equilibrium here is time awareness plus timing sensitivity. Not every task must be done immediately. Not every delay is inefficient. The pragmatist refines their timing when they sense what the system is ready for, not just what the schedule dictates. This balance between mechanical time and organic timing transforms them into temporal architects. And with a primary drive of things, the pragmatist is energized by tangible outcomes. But equilibrium adds purpose to productivity. They begin to ask, what's the impact of what I build? What is this system sustaining or suppressing? When they build from balance, their outcomes aren't just completed, they're coherent. The pragmatist becomes more than a doer, they become a stabilizing axis, holding the world between reliability and renewal. Quantum leaders the pragmatist, observer effect, and the collapse of possibility. The pragmatist's natural style, centered on function, logic, and execution, might seem immune to abstract influence, but the observer effect changes the game entirely. In the quantum view, even the most grounded, action-oriented leader shapes reality simply by how they observe it. The pragmatist's attention, clear, targeted, specific, is not neutral. It selects which outcomes solidify. The moment they fix their gaze on a problem or solution, they begin collapsing probabilities into form. This makes their presence in the system far more influential than they may realize. With a motivation direction of away from, the pragmatist is often observing risks, breakdowns, and inefficiencies. This attention sharpens safety and performance, but the quantum principle warns, what you focus on repeatedly, you reinforce. If the pragmatist habitually scans for what could go wrong, they may anchor their environment in subtle tension or limitation. But when they intentionally shift their lens toward what's working, or what could, they begin reinforcing capability and solution instead of just defect. Their attention focus on self helps them maintain consistency. But now, that internal awareness must be recognized as a field of projection. Their beliefs about themselves, their competence, pressure, urgency, radiate into the systems they touch. When they observe themselves as barely keeping up, the system around them becomes heavier. When they begin to see themselves as calm, sufficient, and reliable, the environment subtly reorganizes toward flow. The internal gaze becomes an invisible instruction to the system. With an internal frame of reference, the pragmatist trusts their judgment. But in quantum terms, even internal assumptions collapse outer possibilities. If they believe a process won't improve, or a team member isn't capable, that very belief influences behavior, response, and outcome. The observer effect challenges the pragmatists to audit their certainties, not because they're wrong, but because they shape reality. Strategic neutrality becomes a power tool. Their procedural operational style anchors plans into dependable form. Every time they enact a process, they reinforce the likelihood of a specific result. But if a process is outdated or subtly limiting, their repetition of it makes it harder to escape. The observer effect gives them back agency. By noticing what no longer serves, by shifting how they observe the function, they open new possibilities for design. Even small shifts in observation trigger systemic release. The specific viewpoint of the pragmatist sharpens detail, but it can also narrow probability. Observing flaws, gaps, or inconsistencies is necessary, but when that focus becomes the dominant frame, the bigger picture begins to disappear. The solution may be just outside their current focal range. When they consciously zoom out, observe the whole rather than the part, they often discover the system already trying to solve itself. Their solo work preference amplifies the potency of their observation. In isolation, there are fewer energetic counterpoints. Their thoughts about a problem, process, or project often go unchallenged and thus solidify. This principle encourages the pragmatist to introduce soft feedback loops, moments of dialogue, reflection, or pause that disrupt premature collapse. Even subtle engagement with another mind can reopen possibility. Their dissociated emotional engagement helps them stay objective. But the absence of emotional awareness doesn't neutralize the observer effect. It just makes it unconscious. Their emotions are still shaping the field, even if unacknowledged. A buried frustration may collapse timelines prematurely. A quiet satisfaction may infuse ease into execution. When the pragmatist begins observing emotion as part of their data set, they gain greater influence over outcomes. As a matcher, they rely on what's already worked. This helps them predict results. But it also binds their observation to past patterns. If they keep looking for the same confirmation, they'll keep collapsing similar results. The observer effect asks them to begin observing anomalies, what's almost working, what's emerging, what's unfamiliar. This opens the field beyond replication into subtle innovation. Their through-time orientation makes them masterful at forecasting and delivery. But when their observation of the timeline becomes too fixed, this must happen by then, they may collapse emergent timing. The observer effect invites flexibility. Perhaps the timeline is too fast. Perhaps the delay is seeding a better outcome. When they observe time as responsive, not rigid, the system begins to synchronize in more elegant ways. And their primary drive, things, makes them outcome-oriented. But outcomes are shaped by more than action. They are sculpted by attention. Every task the pragmatist completes is already a response to what they believed possible. If they shift their observation from what needs to be done to what wants to emerge, they become more than an executor. They become a quiet architect, shaping systems not just by doing, but by seeing with clean precision. The more conscious their gaze, the more liberating their results.